Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got this stack of material here, and it details something pretty extraordinary, really high stakes. It's about a recent ultimatum from former President Trump on a Gaza peace proposal.
Yeah, it's not just, another political statement.
No.
This is specific. It has a hard deadline, a really serious military threat attached.
Exactly. Highly time sensitive. So our mission here, for you listening, is basically to break this down. We want to pull out the exact terms, look at how these proposed exchanges, hostages, detainees are supposed to work.
Right, the mechanics of it all. And crucially, what was the immediate reaction from Hamas?
Yeah.
Because this whole thing is being presented as, well, a potential turning point. Could change everything fast.
Absolutely. The clock is ticking on this one. So let's just dive straight into the most, I guess, dramatic part. The deadline itself and the threat that comes with it. What's the actual cutoff time the source mentions?
Okay, so the ultimatum is crystal clear on this. Hamas has to formally accept the whole deal by 6 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. That's it. No wiggle room mentioned.
6 p.m. Sunday. Wow. Okay. And if they don't, if that time passes, or they just outright reject it, the language in the source, it shifts pretty dramatically, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It goes from proposal to, coercion. Trump's stated failure means, and this is a direct quote, all hell like no one has ever seen before.
Oh, hell, that's intense.
It is. And he framed it on social media, saying this was a decisive chance to end the fighting. But right alongside that, there's this stark warning. Hamas fighters will be hunted down and killed if the deal's rejected.
Hunted down and killed. I mean, that's pretty blunt language for a public peace offer. It really shows how the administration is framing this like it's the final test, one last chance for Hamas to choose peace.
And he apparently also said there will be peace in the Middle East one way or the other.
Yeah.
So they're not really leaving much room for negotiation there.
No, it sounds very definitive.
And, that kind of urgency, that specific threat, it serves a purpose, right?
Yeah.
The documents also mention an appeal for civilians in Gaza to relocate to safer areas before things potentially escalate.
Ah, right. That detail.
Yeah, it's important because it kind of sets the stage. If Hamas says no, the thinking seems to be, well, the military action that follows is framed as a consequence of their rejection.
Not a consequence of the deal itself, but of it failing.
Exactly. It puts the onus entirely on Hamas.
Okay, that really does set an incredibly high bar. So, moving on from the threat, let's look at the deal itself. If Hamas were to accept this, under this pressure, what are the actual requirements for both sides? This is where we get into the structure of it all.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is how fundamental the changes are that this proposal demands. For Hamas, it's existential, really. They have to completely disarm.
Completely, like no weapons at all.
Yeah, that's what the source indicates, yeah. Total disarmament. And they have to step down from any governing role in Gaza.
So basically cease to exist as a military and political force.
Pretty much. And then, of course, the other major requirement is releasing all hostages, both the living and the remains of those deceased, immediately and unconditionally.
Okay, those are huge demands on Hamas. What about Israel? What does the proposal say they have to do in return? What are the concessions?
Well, if Hamas meets those conditions, disarmament, stepping down from power, the sources say Israel would then pull its forces out of Gaza.
A full withdrawal.
Seems like it, yeah. Withdraw forces and agree to a complete ceasefire. So it's basically trading the end of Hamas's operations for the end of Israel's military operations in Gaza.
That makes the core transaction pretty clear. But what about the people involved, the Hamas members themselves? What happens to them according to this plan?
Right. The source details two paths there. First, there's an offer of amnesty for Hamas members who lay down their weapons right away, kind of a reintegration option.
Okay.
Second, for those who want to leave Gaza altogether, the plan offers safe passage to other countries. So it's trying to deal with the fighters who remain.
Get them out of the picture, essentially.
Reduces the immediate security risk, clears the way for whatever comes next.
Which brings up a big question. Who fills that power vacuum? If Hamas is gone and Israeli forces withdraw, what prevents total chaos? The source mentions something else, right?
It does. A really key part of the U.S. plan mentioned is deploying an international stabilization force.
Oh, okay. An international force.
Yeah, backed by the U.S. The idea is they step in, keep order, manage the transition, and, stop things from falling apart or Hamas regrouping immediately.
But wait, if Israel's pulling out completely, how quickly can an international force realistically step in? Especially given that tight 72-hour timeline for hostage release we'll get to. That sounds like a huge logistical challenge.
That's definitely a tension point in the material, isn't it? The timing is incredibly ambitious. It suggests the planning for this force, its mandate, who's involved, that must already be mostly worked out behind the scenes.
So the threat is the lever to force acceptance.
Right. Force acceptance of the terms, and then hope the international community can scramble to fill the gap before it collapses into more fighting. It's definitely putting the political agreement ahead of the practical implementation.
Yeah, that seems risky. Okay, so we have the political demands. Now let's focus on the human side, the hostage and detainee exchange. This is where the numbers get really specific and quite, well, staggering. What's the time frame for releasing the Israeli hostages?
It's extremely fast. The documents say all Israeli hostages, living and deceased, have to be released within 72 hours of Israel formally signing off on the deal.
72 hours. It's incredibly tight for locating everyone, verifying, coordinating the actual transfer. Huge pressure.
Immense pressure, yeah, on everyone involved.
And on the other side of the exchange, what about the Palestinian prisoners Israel would release? The scale of that is important too, right?
It is. It's significant. In return for all the hostages, the plan says Israel would release 250 Palestinians who are currently serving life sentences.
Wow, 250 life sentences. That's politically huge for any Israeli government.
Absolutely. And on top of that, another 1,700 detainees currently held from Gaza.
So releasing people serving life, that's a major concession. It really signals how much value the architects of this deal are placing on getting all the hostages back right now. They're willing to trade away significant security leverage for it.
It certainly seems that way. Releasing long-term security prisoners, especially those serving life, is always incredibly sensitive in Israel. The fact that this specific number is in the proposal, well, it tells you something about the priorities driving this particular U.S.-led ultimatum. It's about resolving the hostage crisis, seemingly at a very high internal political cost for Israel.
And there's another grim detail in there about the remains.
Yes, there is. It's necessary to include, I suppose. The proposal specifies a ratio for the exchange of remains. For every deceased Israeli return, 0.15 Palestinian remains would be repatriated to Gaza.
15-1. That ratio itself says a lot about the reported imbalance in casualties during the conflict.
It reflects that reality, yes. And all of these exchanges, both the living people and the remains, would happen under a temporary halt in Israeli military operations, just to make the transfers safe.
Okay, that paints a very detailed picture of the terms on the table. Now, let's step back a bit. Why now? Why this ultimatum at this specific moment? The source material puts it in context, doesn't it?
It does. You can't separate this from the background. This comes after the October 7th attacks in Israel, where nearly 1,200 people were killed. Israel's military response since then has caused, well, utter devastation in Gaza.
Right. Thousands dead, millions displaced, whole areas just gone.
Exactly. Life for many people there is described as basically unlivable. That's the immediate backdrop. Massive destruction and a humanitarian crisis.
And there's international pressure, too. The source mentions a specific finding that's very controversial, but definitely part of the global conversation now.
That's right. It notes a recent UN commission concluded Israel's actions amounted to genocide. Now, the source is careful to state that Israel strongly denies that charge.
Of course. But the finding itself exists.
Right. And whether you agree with the finding or not, the fact that a UN body reported that adds immense international pressure. This ultimatum could be seen as an attempt to respond to that pressure, or maybe leverage it. It adds to the sense of urgency.
So given all that, the threat, the humanitarian crisis, the international context, what was the immediate initial word from Hamas about this deal?
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, a senior Hamas official told the BBC they were unlikely to accept it.
Unlikely. So a quick negative signal.
A very quick, fairly clear signal, yeah. Suggests a fundamental problem with the core demands right from the outset.
And did they say why? What specific parts of the proposal were the deal breakers for them?
Yes, they pointed to two main things, which, as we discussed, are really central to the whole deal. First, the demand that Hamas disarms.
Giving up their weapons.
Right, which for them means, ceasing to be what they see as a resistance movement. That's core to their identity. Second, they rejected the idea of an international stabilization force coming in. They apparently view it as just another form of occupation, something that would block them from ever returning to power. The official basically argued the whole deal is structured to serve Israeli interests by forcing Hamas's surrender, while Israel's concessions are potentially only temporary.
So the analysis from their side is that it's just surrender terms dressed up as a peace deal. It failed to bridge that fundamental gap.
It seems that way. Hamas appears unwilling to trade its existence, its political and military identity for a ceasefire, even with this massive threat hanging over them.
The ultimatum brought clarity, maybe urgency, but didn't actually create grounds for agreement.
Apparently not. The core demand for disarmament seems to be the insurmountable obstacle based on that initial reaction.
So where does that leave things? What does this all mean for what happens next? The source seems to lay out two very stark possibilities for you, the listener, depending on what happens by that Sunday deadline.
Yeah, it really boils it down. Either the administration manages to pull off a huge diplomatic coup with this aggressive move, claiming a breakthrough, or, and this seems far more likely given the rejection,
Yes.
the war enters what the source calls a new and potentially even more destructive phase. It really positions this deadline as the pivot point.
A single deadline determining whether we see a claimed success or a significant escalation. And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, that point about civilians needing to relocate to safer areas. That requires some serious thought, doesn't it? Especially given everything the sources say about the conditions in Gaza already. So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. Considering the reported devastation, millions displaced, infrastructure destroyed, what does safer areas even mean in that context?
That's the question, isn't it?
And how logistically feasible is that demand, really? Telling potentially hundreds of thousands of people to move, again, with maybe only hours' notice before all hell breaks loose. It's where the political maneuvering meets a very grim, practical reality on the ground. Something to think about as this deadline approaches.